Start again. This is all about having a good international reputation. Now, I don't mind if you refer to this as the national interest of international reputation, international community, or being a good international citizen. You can use whichever one you want. But the fact is, states want to and need to be thought of in positive ways. It's not surprising to me the way those two lists popped up. Most people would think those that way. It's not right or wrong to think that way. But some states end up having a more positive reputation than others. Of international reputation or international community. So you can use the different terms interchangeably. I prefer either being a good international citizen or being a member of the international community or having a good international reputation. They all mean the same thing. So Indonesia is going to do three things. We want to take a guess what those three things are based on these pictures. Yes? Specifically, what with the military? Yes, they're the UN blue hats and democracy. These are three things Indonesia has done over the past decade to improve its reputation. Most of the world has thought not that much of it throughout the 80s and 90s because of some bad things it did. Most Australians still have a fairly negative view of Indonesia, mostly because they don't know much about it. It's done three things in particular in the last decade to improve its reputation. In context, pre-2000, Indonesia was characterised by an economically unstable state. They were undemocratic. They had regimes which were led by generals, one after another. So no elections, and not only no elections, but their leader was always a member of the military. And so they used the military to suppress minority groups. So when the West Papuans would speak up, they'd send in the army. When the East Timorese would speak up, they'd send in the army. When the Achinese called for independence, send in the army, and every time do the same thing. Suppress them through violence. And during those years, they had fairly poor relations with their neighbours. So this is the background. This is what they're trying to improve on. Also, post-2000, there are still issues with human rights and corruption. So this is what they're trying to improve. But the issue is a need to improve their reputation because of fairly violent negative past. If you can contrast this to Australia pre-2000, you can look it up. You can use that phrase, corruption perception index. I was going to ask. No, this is just painting the picture of so the issue is to improve their reputation because this is the negative. This is what has caused a negative reputation. So, here you go. So the issue. Indonesia wants a good international citizen with a positive reputation. So that's the issue. How can we improve the way the world sees us? Because most of the world, including most Australians, don't think of Indonesia in the same way that they might think of Switzerland or Norway or France. So the answers you gave a moment ago are really normal. They're the states you think of positively. Indonesia wants to try and change that by doing stuff explicitly, not hoping it accidentally happens. So, what have they done? Number one, page 30. Page 30. We're equal nights with Canada. Who's at the top? That's because they don't have corrupt New South Wales policy. Okay, so in terms of aid, what have they done? They've started contributing to foreign aid. So for decades, they've received foreign aid from Australia. They're just now starting to contribute aid to other states. So in times of emergency, they give aid to states, including Australia. Indonesia has given us aid. I'm on page 30. $1 million flood victims. President Cicelo Bang Bang Yudhoyono has ordered a donation of $1 million to help victims of the recent floods in Queensland. Quote, I've sent a letter to the National Disaster Mitigation Agency to allocate $1 million to Queensland, said the Coordinating Minister for People's Affairs. The second article there, they're both short articles. Australia takes flood aid from Indonesia. Prime Minister Julia Gillard has accepted an offer of flood relief from Indonesian President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. In a phone call between the two leaders, Mr. Yudhoyono said he was happy to send over expert Indonesian engineers to help with post-disaster surveying and flood-ravaged Queensland. So this is something positive. It was well publicised at the time, this gesture of goodwill from our neighbour. So they've given $42 million in aid over 10 years. In contrast to what Australia gives, it's almost nothing. And when we get to the effectiveness of it, we'll talk about how it's not that effective. It's symbolic. Australia gives $5.7 billion per year. So that's 5,700 million versus an average of 4.2 million. But it's a good start. Indonesia giving aid to other states in the region when they have emergencies. So that's number one, giving aid in times of natural disaster. Is the Queensland example. Number 2, UN peacekeeping. And again, I'm going to read from page 29, and the heading says it all. Indonesia wants to advance peacekeeping role in 2011. Indonesia wants to strengthen its role as a peacekeeper by being a peacekeeping hub in Asia and increase its contribution to UN peacekeeping missions. Foreign Minister Nadalegawa made the announcement while briefing reporters in an early press conference in Jakarta. Quote, regarding the issue of peacekeeping operations, Indonesia has actively contributed to the development of the strategic concept of global peacekeeping. In 2011, Indonesia will attempt to be a hub for the peacekeeping network in the region. He said Indonesians sent 1,785 officers to participate in peacekeeping in 2010. So these two things together are both examples of aid, economic aid and military aid. And you can tell how we're going to think more positively about Indonesia, how other states are going to think more positively when they see these two examples. In times of natural disaster, they chip in. When the world needs peacekeeping, in times of natural disaster, they chip in. Positive things. They're going to improve their reputation. Both of these examples of aid. Are they effective? They're symbolically effective. Now, this is a country which for a long time has received aid. Now it's giving out aid. So yes, there's a symbolic effectiveness. It definitely improves diplomatic relations. You know, giving aid to someone is going to make the diplomats in that state feel better, feel more positively towards you. And you could say that them making it to the UN Security Council is a sign of them improving their reputation. 07-08, they served their 2-year term on the Security Council. You have to get elected to the Security Council by other states. It's a popular election. So yes, in some ways effective. However, the aid contributions are tiny. As I said a second ago, 4.2 million. So relative to Australia, they don't contribute that much in aid. That's why you'd call it something that's symbolically significant, but not really that effective. Also, this is the same with all states. Even when they do good things, the bad things they do often undermine the good things. And we know Indonesia still has some bad things. States try and do good things to make up for the bad things they do. A good example is China and pandas. China loves giving out pandas to countries, to their national zoos. And the world loves them because they're pandas. It's so cool. But most of the world looks past the pandas and sees the anti-democratic China, the China that represses minorities, etc., etc. So the world sees through what they're trying to do with the pandas. And the same is true. The same is true here. It doesn't solve bad things. Koala diplomacy. Well, soon they're going to be close to endangered, so maybe we can soon start doing it. They're all dying. They've got a cancerous disease that they're passing on, so they're wiping themselves out. Kangaroos, on the other hand, we've got a truckload of them. It wouldn't surprise me, yeah. We've got big issues with too many kangaroos. Okay, so that's aid. Any questions about aid? Okay. So, let's just briefly link aid to foreign policy. We've got 4 foreign policy instruments: diplomacy, trade, military power, and aid. We've looked at 3 of these. Aid is the last one. Remember, these are the tools states use. Aid is one of those tools. Aid can be economic. So in terms of emergency, you provide aid, or in terms of development, you provide aid. Australia spends almost all of our aid on development aid. We give money to states in the region to help them develop their schools, their hospitals, their healthcare systems, their electoral system. So we give large amounts of money to help develop the region because we want a more stable region. We want more consumers for the things that we can then sell them. Yeah, it's a tricky one, but it's because it aids states in what they do. I know it doesn't seem like aid. It seems like something that's bad. But between those 2 states, it can be used in a positive way. So that's the way it becomes aid. And certainly in the case of UN peacekeepers, the state of design literally tells us that that is an example of aid. States contributing troops to peacekeeping is the use of foreign policy. So, specifically, contributing UN troops to peacekeeping missions. Now, we're going to come back to foreign policy instruments next week and do them one by one in a table form. But this is a tool that Indonesia has chosen to use for a purpose. And that purpose is to improve its reputation. Because in other parts of their day-to-day life, they're using other tools that are giving them a negative reputation, like military power. Oh. Need to. I do need to move on. You've got access to the PowerPoint. It's on my portal. The next one. So, if aid is one thing they do, democracy or the process of democratization is another thing they do. Some forms of government are more desirable than others. And year by year, we get more and more democracies and fewer regimes. I think it was Times Magazine or The Economist last week called democracy the idea of the 20th century. The most important concept in the 20th century wasn't economic progress, it wasn't scientific progress. They argued it was democracy. So this is still how they improve their reputation. So we're still in the national interest priority of improving their international reputation.
Oh, there are 2 responses.
Yes, they've done 2 things: aid, democracy. Kate, you had your hand up.
Yeah, the way we can learn about both responses, because you know the six, we have a couple where there's two responses and then other ones with only one response.
Yeah.
We just learn that one.
You'll never get a question that'll ask you about one or the other. The question will always be broad, and then you'll choose what you want to use to answer it. So I am giving you a bit more content than you need. A couple of these. It'll make sense when you start organising it, because you'll start to be able to organise them by soft power, hard power. You'll have things both. Or you'll be able to say an essay which is A as a foreign policy versus diplomacy. I'm giving you a little bit more than you need. All right, democracy. Indonesia, right up until 1998, had regimes. Autocratic, meaning it was a leader who wasn't democratically elected. They've now had 3 democratic elections for president, including one a month ago, and they're still counting the votes. It's one of only several democracies in the region. There are very few. So in that sense, it is fairly unique. You can use the word democracy or democratization. So that's the process of becoming a democracy. If you look at all the countries on this list over here, Switzerland, New Zealand, Norway, Japan, England, Canada, all democracies, all the ones on the list that you like democracy, a lot of the ones on the list that you don't like aren't democracies. North Korea is not, Russia really is done now. Iraq is just going through democratization, so democracy. Syria is not. Afghanistan is going through it now. Somalia is not. Iran is not. China is not. But most of the ones on the list of countries you don't like aren't democracies. It doesn't surprise me. We tend to think more positively of democracies. The people hold the leaders to account. And Indonesians love it. They defend it in a way Australians don't defend voting. We complain about voting all the time. Indonesians are all for it. Yes, he was.
What Indonesia is showing is that it is possible to develop a democracy and a modern economy that neither compromises people's security nor their ability to practice their religion. Indeed, far from endangering safety, prosperity, and religious identity, it is democracy that helps to ensure them. And this has huge implications for others around the world seeking the same fundamental freedoms in places like Egypt, Iran, and Syria. Indonesia's transformation is not just vital to its own future, prosperity, and security. If Indonesia can succeed, it can lead the world in showing how democracy can offer an alternative to the dead-end choice of dictatorship or extremism.
So, the world has loved the Indonesian story because you've got this massive Islamic state which has shown that you can transition to democracy peacefully. You've got all these failed Islamic states in the Middle East, and none of them are democratic. But here is this state which is mostly Muslim, 250 million people, about 90% of them are Muslim, and they've transitioned to democracy, and it's going well. And that's David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, singing the praises of Indonesia.
Well, what we learned from the Arab Spring so far, and one of the invariable lessons is the Act 2 of a regime change drama could be even as challenging as the Act 1. I mean, the...
We're going to skip that one. The last one's cute. You can't hear him very well on these speakers.
Ya anak-anak, ada yang bisa jawab?
Candles on a cake, candles on a cake, blow them out, puff, 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 candles on a cake.
Permisi Pak Ketua, seharusnya jalannya sidang ini tidak boleh.
Sorry bos, ada interupsi dikit.
Saya tahu. Ya.
Kamu tahu nggak? Kamu tahu nggak? Aduh, berantem mulu sih. Ada yang bisa jawab lagi?
It's a commentary on how difficult democracy is in Indonesia. You've got the entrepreneurs who are bribing the politicians. You've got the military who keeps beating up the farmers. And this kid who loves democracy and wants to talk about it, he doesn't quite know what to say. Yeah. So, how effective is it? Yes, it's improved their reputation, elected Security Council. It gives them the same form of government as other important countries in the region. Australia, Japan, USA, South Korea, all major economies, all democratic governments. And this great quote from the Council on Foreign Relations, Indonesia has begun to reclaim some of the mantle of leadership in ASEAN. So because of their democratic, transparent form of government, they're considered as the leaders of ASEAN. Even though every country has equal leadership in ASEAN, they're considered the major leaders. So democracy has helped separate them from the pack of ASEAN non-democratic states. But it's limited, and it's limited in the same way that aid is limited. It still does bad stuff. So even though it's democratic, it still chops down the forests, it still beats up West Papuans, it still doesn't recognise refugees. So you can do all the nice things in the world, you can have the best democracy in the world, but if you do bad things, the world's going to find out about it. It's going to affect your reputation. Now, with time against us, because we're trying to get through 2 in 1 day, I'm not going to get you to questions, but I do want you to plan an answer to one question. So imagine you got this 10-mark question. Just want you to do your little plan. You do 2 marks on this, 4 marks on this, 1 mark on that, however. How would you break up your marks to answer this question? Explain what action Indonesia has taken to become a more active member of the international community. So do a little plan in your notes. And I'm going to pull out 2 people to read out how they break up their marks and put that up on the screen. So do a little plan. I'm going to yell out 2 people's names to tell me what their plan looks like.